Hinson-Hasty. I'm host of this conversation we call Leading Theologically. I'm the Senior Director of Theological Education Funds Development at the Presbyterian Church USA Foundation. This is a ministry of the Committee on Theological Education. And I'm here with my friend who has as many titles or as many syllables in the multiple titles he holds. Brian Ellison, thanks for being here as you're traveling out on the West Coast from your home in the Kansas City area. Glad to have you here today.
Thank you so much, Lee. It really is my privilege. I appreciate you. I've appreciated your work and your insight across a few different jobs in the denomination over the years, and I'm glad to be with you now.
Thanks. Brian Ellison is Executive Director of the Covenant Network of Presbyterians and has been in that position almost a decade. That's hard to believe. It feels like it was yesterday. But,
a lot has happened in those 10 years.
Golly, a lot has happened. Beautiful things. He is a teaching elder. He is a radio host. He is a journalist. He has served as a pastor. We'll put his bio and link in the chat and share that. We're here to talk about LGBTQIA plus inclusion in the church, real inclusion, which is some work that his organization, the Covenant Network of Presbyterians, is working on right now. He also serves us in the church in many ways, currently on the Permanent Judicial Commission of the General Assembly, but has been on the Committee on the Office of the General Assembly, the Mission Committee on the Mission Responsibility through Investment. That's our sort of social responsibility filter kind of committee that helps us. My good friend Rob Four now is in that staff role. Committee on the Office of the General Assembly, COGA, Board of Pensions as the director. Thank you for everything that you do and you're currently doing as in the Covenant Network, and also with the Synod of Mid-America. I forgot to mention that he is the stated clerk for that synod, as well as one of its presbyteries, Heartland Presbytery, which is sort of Kansas City area, correct?
Yeah, we're Kansas City and beyond. We go all the way up to the Iowa border on the Missouri side, all the way out to South Paola and Osawatomie and Gardner in eastern Kansas. So
I need to come and visit Heartland Presbytery.
You absolutely should. Consider this your invitation.
Okay, I love it. So friends, we just like for you to let us know you're out there and the questions you have. But as I always do, and I think you know, Brian, I usually start with a question about vocation and call. I love baptism is, one of our two sacraments, and it's about our call and being named and claimed. But it's our claiming Jesus Christ as Lord and how we live out that faith is something we're asking that question every day, and we take a vow to help each other ask that question. So I'm wondering, what is it that is giving you life? Howard Thurman says, what is it that makes you come alive? Because we need people who are coming alive. Katie Cannon says it's the work your soul must have. What is that work? What is that life giving force for you these days?
Yeah, I appreciate that question, Lee. I feel like I have this amazing privilege of getting to do the thing that gives me life as my job. There's a lot of ways to have life in things that are not your job, the things you're not paid for. But I actually get to do that as executive director of the Covenant Network. As you said, I have several jobs. A lot of people know me from the work I do on the polity side with the stated clerk jobs. And, there's a lot of that I'm going to just confess to you, maybe life-giving for some people, but isn't all that life-giving for me. Agendas and minutes.
Thanks for the honesty.
Well, and I can do those things, agendas and minutes and parliamentary procedure. But what I love about the stated clerk job and the thing that gives me life about it is finding ways to use the polity, use the tools of the church, use the history and theology of the way we live together to bring about mission. And the fact that in some ways, I guess my work with the Covenant Network doesn't seem all that different from that to me. A lot of what we have been about through the history of the Covenant Network Church and strengthen it to do using what it is fundamentally about, mission and evangelism and hospitality, the tools of being church, to really live into the gospel. And that daily exercise is incredibly life-giving to me. It's the part of my work that I love the most.
I had a couple of glitches, at least on my side, but hopefully not in Facebook. But I think what I heard you say is using, and it makes sense to me and how I've experienced you, is the daily disciplines of the church, and helping others use those, and using them yourself to make a difference in the church and the world. Is that about right?
Yeah, yes. And I hope I'm not having internet problems here, but I'm, as you mentioned, I'm in a hotel in Seattle, but yes, the polity of the church, it's so boring, so bland to so many people, but to me, it's opportunities, it's instruments for mission and ministry. And that's what's exciting to me.
Right. Yeah. I mean, and part of those instruments are within the polity and the governance, and some of those are partner organizations like the Covenant Network of Presbyterians. Right. I mean, we're all in this together in being church. I was having a conversation this morning, and somebody was talking about, I went to bed, praying for, a way forward. I didn't see a way forward. And then somebody sent me an email the next day, and it was just like, God's providence. And I feel like you're that kind of person, and Covenant Network is that kind of organization. And the way you operate within the governance, you're that kind of person who shows up with the tools to be a partner. I think of you as a real partner in ministry. You have a partner in your daily life, right? But you're a partner in ministry. I think of many people, common friends that we have. You're somebody who works alongside others, I feel like, and I see that giving others life when you do that. So thank you for that.
Well, that's high praise. Those are really meaningful compliments. I appreciate that. Mm-hmm. And I can't think of a better description of what it means to be the church, what the meaning of community is, than that we would partner with each other toward mission, toward gospel work.
Now, I didn't mention it. Your undergraduate work was at Harvard, right? And your MDiv at Princeton Seminary. Did you in that time read any, I'm just guessing, any Letty Russell during that time? Or I don't know, who are some theologians that formed you ecclesiologically, maybe?
Yeah. I think a lot of the theology, I didn't really start engaging theology until college in the first place, and seminary in earnestness. And I think so even the classical theologians were sort of mind-blowing to me. Calvin was mind-blowing to me. Barth was mind-blowing to me. I think as I've appreciated the practical theology of a lot of folks who I've read since then. He'll be embarrassed that I'm listing him alongside Barth and Calvin, but when I read Cliff Kirkpatrick's book about what it meant to be church while I was in seminary, that actually was an eye opener. The idea that we would form community through being church together, and has really influenced my thinking about the work I do with the Covenant Network, as well as in the Synod and the Presbytery. The theology that guides my thinking about church is the idea that we are not an institution or an organization, and our rules are not just rules. They are about forming a covenant community. And it's all about how we enter into relationship with each other, what is demanded of each other, and how we can serve each other. When we function in covenant, we do well, and when we depart from our covenant with each other, we mess it up.
Yeah, things go haywire. That's for sure. Talking about Clifford Patrick, talking about covenant theologically, not just as an organization, but as a kind of a concept and theological term, that all lines up for me. That has definitely been my experience of who you are and what you do. And I think Cliff would be honored. And I see you, for folks who don't know, younger generations, Cliff was a longtime stated clerk, was head of world mission for quite some time as well, did ecumenical work. I didn't even mention earlier that Brian, part of his vocation too is, maybe I mentioned it briefly, KCUR, and NPR affiliate. He is a hosting contributor there. I experience you definitely that way. And maybe that's a way into our topic around covenant and being church and what it means, especially here we are in June and Pride Month, and LGBTQIA plus inclusion. There's been a lot of great things that have happened in terms of in our book of order for full inclusion, but that isn't necessary. Just because it's in the book of order doesn't mean it's really happening, right? There's more work to do. And I suspect that's the edge where you and Covenant Network are working these days.
Well, that's right. I first of all, I want to appreciate your sartorial splendor today. I am disappointed there's not a bow tie involved, but I'm delighted by the rainbow.
Next time.
You're absolutely right. I think the work of inclusion and justice for LGBTQIA plus people in the church, I think a lot of folks thought come 2011, when the church voted to allow ordination of gay and lesbian people, that mission accomplished. And some people thought, okay, there's one more mission. We have to talk about marriage. And in 2015, the church voted to allow ministers to perform same-sex marriages and for churches to host them. But what I have realized, I think we knew this at the time anecdotally, we certainly know it experientially now, that work is far from concluded. Just because it's permitted does not mean that it is happening, certainly is not happening everywhere. And even in the places where people are being ordained, LGBTQIA plus people are being ordained or married, acceptance isn't universal. It is often only through struggle and pain that it is accomplished. We have a long way to go. The mission of the Covenant Network these days, we summarize it as educating, engaging, and equipping. Something that we always said back, even when we were much more engaged in kind of legislative lobbying at the General Assembly level, when we were organizing and trying to win votes in presbyteries, is that we are not just about winning votes. We are about strengthening the church. We are about winning hearts and minds to build a better community. The Covenant Network was always committed to unity and inclusion. And today, I think that is no less true and no less needed. We experience, I get calls in the office all the time from candidates and inquirers who are struggling with understanding their presbyteries. Even more than that, I get calls from churches, and usually they're churches that are 100% supportive. They want to be welcoming. They want to be inclusive. They want to ordain their first gay elders and deacons. They want to have their first same-sex marriage, but they don't know how to talk about it in their church. They're worried about the impact. They're worried they're going to alienate someone. They've been welcoming for 20 years and no gay people walk in the door.
It makes, I don't know, would you equate this? I was thinking, and there'd been some attention a couple of years ago. There was a status of women study my wife Elizabeth was involved in, and others. It was for I think it was for the World Council of Churches, but it was based on some work in the PCUSA, and just the stained glass ceiling is still there, in so many ways in terms of pastorates and pay and opportunities, et cetera. And we started ordaining women at least in 1954 in the Northern Church. That's, decades ago. Do you think there's a similar path, or do you think would you put those kinds of things alongside each other, or, we learn from that? That, and does that help people? Maybe what do you say to those churches when they call you? Maybe that's the way to think about this. I'm trying to figure out, like, how can we get there faster, Brian? It's
a great question, and I'm, as a dude, I want to be careful about assuming that I fully understand the struggle that women in ministry have had either in the 1950s or today. But I think one thing that does seem to me parallel is that just because the door got opened did not mean that the battle for equity was accomplished. Right. And in fact, I think we could say with certainty that there is not yet equity. The studies of salaries would show that. The studies of who is in the top positions in churches would show that. And we're very conscious of that problem and not entirely sure of the solution, except to keep working on it. And I think that is very true with LGBTQIA plus people in the church as well. We're at a place where there are presbyteries that are more than eager to ordain LGBTQIA plus people as ministers, right. But are there jobs for them? Are there churches that are going to call them? Are they willing to see them as heads of staff at this point? I occupy a place of privilege because I entered ministry in 1999 not being out of the closet. And so I accumulated experience as a pastor, but not as a gay man serving as a pastor because I wasn't out. For folks who don't have those years of accumulating privilege that I did, it's still a pretty tough world out there in the church. And in fact, it can be really exhausting. I know plenty of pastors of openly LGBTQ pastors whose first does not find a lot of fellowship, community around them. If you don't have that and you're dealing with the pressures of being maybe the first openly gay person to serve in a church, it can be a really exhausting ministry. And some of them decide, I'd rather do something else. So equity, I think you asked what I would say to a church. I mean, what I'd say to a church is, equity is not just about ignoring the person's sexual orientation. It is not about saying we're not going to care about the fact that someone is LGBTQ. I think it is about understanding that the benefits of the whole person being the whole person. And engaging them and sharing their life with them the same way you would any other pastor. And that's a growing edge for a lot of churches, but it's a great opportunity for ministry.
Right. 100%. Maybe just, kind of naming and claiming, like, this work isn't done. You said that we've got to live into these changes, and it's every community, every leader. I'm sure there's leaders out there, some who would self-identify as LGBTQIA in one way or another, but there are probably a lot of allies out there also, and some folks who are just trying to figure this out. Maybe they're not there yet. Maybe their church isn't there yet. What are some places that you would? Maybe there's some resources within Covenant or other places. Where would you tell people to find community, to find partners, to find conversation partners? What is it? What kind of some first steps for people?
Yeah, I think it's really important to know, and good and comforting, I hope, to know that you're not doing this alone if you're a church that is asking these questions. In some cases, other churches in your presbytery are addressing the same questions. And if they're not, other churches around the country are. One of the things the Covenant Network of Presbyterians is doing right now is trying to engage through a program we're calling Covenant Conversations. These are events where we try to bring congregations and leaders, church leaders, together who may be at different places on this journey, but who all want to sort of take steps forward, to learn from each other, to develop resources together, and to to learn, to actually engage, rather than just sort of throw our hands up and say we don't know what to do. We've had these events.
And it's not like a one, two, three kind of there's not a train that you get on and go one direction with this, right?
Well, that's exactly right. And unfortunately, I mean, that's unfortunate, right? Because during the pandemic, it would have been great if we could have just put out a video that said, here are the 10 steps to being a welcoming church. But it doesn't work that way. Most things in the church don't work that way. Every situation is different. The questions people are raising are different. And remember, just like when we were debating this 10 years ago, it's not really just an issue. It's about people's lives. Amen. So it's how do we reach the people in this community? How do we answer the questions people are asking here? You know, we're working on a covenant conversation. We were planning it before the pandemic in Charlotte. And the planning team there, which I hope will be coming back together very soon to begin that work again, was focused a lot on intersectional issues among LGBTQIA plus people of color, and unique questions facing the communities of that presbytery. We talked when we had an event in it was in San Antonio about the Spanish-speaking congregations of that area and the particular cultural and ethnic questions that were raised around LGBTQIA plus issues that maybe called for some special reflection on the part of churches. It's not just race or ethnicity, but the particular challenges of particular places. These are what we want to be able to engage and what we have to engage, just like we would anything else when we're talking about evangelism or about hospitality or about social justice in a particular community. But it is hard work, Lee, and that's the thing that I think is challenging. Is we want it to be as simple as putting a rainbow flag outside the church. We want it to be as simple as a well-crafted welcome statement on the front of the bulletin, but it isn't. It requires real engagement, real theological reflection, and reflection on who we are, what our identity as a church is.
Well, and it sounds, and contextually, doing that contextually where you live and what you're about. And I appreciate you bringing in the intersectional sort of things. I'm thinking of class, race, ethnicity, gender, sexual orientation. All of these kind of come together, and every place is different. They're at different steps. That's helpful. You can't just go to, there's not a handbook or a guidebook, and that's hopefully comforting to some people. Charles Smith, I think, is in a leadership role, maybe in Grace Presbytery, is on saying that he's a big fan of conversations, and even he's giving me an okay on the bow tie. I have a rainbow bow tie. I'm so sorry. I can't find it.
All right. It's okay.
COVID has taken it away from me. But he's talking about partnership and teaching together. I mean, that's what, and sometimes it's helpful to have someone who's maybe not in your presbytery, somebody like you. And I feel like that's one of your gifts, is as a host, as someone who can ask the right question and who thinks theologically. I'll never forget your sermon at a Nick's Church National Gathering in Chicago. I mean, I think you identify as a preacher of the gospel, of the good news, and this is not just like social justice work, right? This is theological work that we're doing, right?
Well, and I don't want to accept that that's a dichotomy. I think social justice work is theological work.
Amen.
And I interpret social justice work as a critical part of evangelism, of proclamation. And, I think a lot of churches that who are quick to sort of reject social justice work, or at least let it blur into the background, their ears will perk up if you talk about hospitality, if you talk about evangelism, if you talk about welcoming people to your church. It's the same work, and it's essential work for the gospel, both for justice and for introducing people more fully to to Christ and to the church. I feel like I've been remiss in, I keep saying LGBTQ, which is inclusive of transgender and gender non-binary folks, but I think that is particularly important to raise up in this moment. So much of the church's debate over the years was on same-sex practice and the ordination of gay and lesbian and bisexual people, but when we're not debating a polity issue like ordination or who can marry whom, we have often neglected to speak sufficiently about the challenges and the opportunities for inclusion of transgender and gender non-binary folks in the church. Thankfully, the General Assembly did take a position on that back in 2018, finally. And we are, as a church, on record as being committed to calling on congregations as well as to our partners around the world to work to protect the dignity and humanity of trans folks and non-binary folks. But I think this is an area, at least in my work with churches, Lee, that a lot of churches are really struggling with. They don't know the right words to use. They don't know the right questions to ask. They don't know the right facilities to provide. And it's very vexing. A lot of them sort of give up. But this is an area where I think engaging with others who are on this road is really important.
Yeah, I mean, what pronouns to use, right? It's important. It's important work. Well, I see our time is just about over, unfortunately. But folks, please get to know Brian, Covenant Network, Synod of Mid-America. Find him on KCUR FM. I don't know if you've got anything coming up there, but I'm going to be looking for you out to listen to you there. Our best to you and to Troy and to your I think there's canine members of your family as well, right?
Yes, we're down to one dog now.
I thought I saw our sympathy and prayers for you. I mean, that's so tough. Mine is back here behind me, giving me support. I mean, they've gotten us through the pandemic, that is for sure. But thanks for who you are, what you do, how you lead, the joy in the way you do it, which is really kind of unbelievable because, man, I mean, ordination in 1999, I'm just thinking there's been a long journey there. And thank you for who you are. I look forward to supporting you and hopefully others too in what you're doing. May we all work for this mission of full inclusion, real inclusion in the coming days. And I'm going to invite you to bless us, charge us. But let me just first say, folks, everybody who's joined us, or if you're joining us after the live show, we're glad you're here. Please look at and listen to the other shows on Leading Theologically on our podcast or on YouTube channel, Theological Education Fund. We're going to actually take a break for the summer. Sabbath rest is important for everyone. I'm encouraging churches to give pastors some Sabbath rest, not just a vacation. And I'm going to take the same advice. We'll be back in August with some more guests, and we'll look forward to that time, but do stay in touch. But Brian, would you charge and bless us as we go?
It would be my privilege. Friends, do go from this conversation to have your own conversations, to conversations within yourself and with God and with each other that shape and transform and advance the cause of Christ, which is a cause that includes all people, not in spite of who they are, but because of who they are. May the grace that has embraced you and the love that God gives us as gift among and with each other, and the community that is our calling, be yours this day and always. Amen.
Amen. Thank you so much. Blessings, everyone. We'll hope to see you soon.